The monster awakens. A cold metal table, bright white lights, the sound of machines humming all around. Zane Carter slowly opened his eyes, his head pounding as if something had been drilling into his brain. His hands were tied to the table with thick restraints, and his body felt heavy, like he had been drugged. A group of aliens stood around him, their dark, reptilian eyes filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. One of them, a tall creature with 4 arms and smooth gray skin, stepped forward. "This is the Abomination," the alien asked, his voice a deep growl. A smaller alien, covered in blue scales, nodded. "Yes, Commander Vex." The humans called him Zane Carter. But he is not just human. He is something else. Zane struggled against his restraints, but they didn't budge. "Where am I?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Vex looked at him like a scientist studying a dangerous animal. "You are in Facility 9, a prison for creatures too dangerous to exist." He leaned closer, his sharp teeth visible. "And you, human, are the most dangerous of them all." Zane's mind was spinning. The last thing he remembered was being on a mission, a routine mission to explore an abandoned station near the Outer Rim. Then there was an ambush, a sudden pain in his skull. And now, this. "You don't know what you are, do you?" Vex's voice had a mocking tone. Typical human. So weak, so fragile. And yet, you survived something no human should have. Zane clenched his jaw. "Let me out, and I'll show you how weak I am." The aliens chuckled, but there was nervousness in their laughter. Even restrained, Zane could feel their fear. One of the scientists, a thin alien with insect-like arms, tapped on a console. A screen appeared above Zane, showing an image of himself, or at least something that looked like him. His body was covered in deep scars, glowing faintly with blue light. His bones seemed denser, his muscles more defined. And his eyes, his once brown eyes, were now silver. What did you do to me?" Zane whispered. Vex shook his head. "Not us. This happened before we found you, before we locked you away." He pointed at the screen. "You are not human anymore. You're something different, something unnatural." The word sent a chill down Zane's spine. He had always been human, a soldier, a fighter. But now, he didn't even recognize himself. The scientist pressed another button, and a new image appeared, security footage. It showed Zane, unconscious in a medical bay. A team of alien doctors stood around him, running tests. Then suddenly, Zane woke up. The footage showed what happened next. He moved faster than any human should. His restraints snapped like they were made of paper. The guards tried to stop him, but he tore through them with inhuman strength. Then came the worst part. His wounds healed instantly. Blaster shots hit his skin, but barely burned him. And his eyes, they glowed like twin stars. The footage ended. "That is why we call you an abomination," Vex said. "You are not a man anymore. You are a monster." Zane's heart pounded. He didn't remember any of it. How could this be real? Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the room. A robotic voice echoed through the facility. "Warning. Security breach detected. All personnel evacuate immediately." The alien stiffened. Vex grabbed a communicator. "Who is attacking?" A static-filled response came through. "Unknown forces. They're here for the human. We can't stop them." Zane felt a surge of adrenaline. Someone was coming for him. But were they here to save him, or kill him? Before Vex could react, the walls exploded. Fire and smoke filled the air. Through the chaos, figures in dark armor stormed in, their weapons glowing blue. One of them pointed at Zane. "Secure the asset. Take him alive." The last thing Zane saw before darkness took over was the ceiling collapsing, and the feeling of falling into the unknown. Hunted by the galaxy, Zane woke up to the sharp sting of cold air against his skin. His body ached, his head throbbed, and his wrists were raw from where the restraints had once been. He was free. But how? Smoke and fire filled the corridor around him. The facility was in chaos. Red lights flashed, alarms blared, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the metal halls. He could hear screams. He could hear them coming. Zane pushed himself up, his muscles burning with effort. His hands trembled, but not from weakness. Something inside him felt different, stronger, faster, alive. Then he saw them. A group of heavily armored soldiers moved through the wreckage, their glowing blue visors scanning the area. Their weapons hummed with energy, unlike any tech he had seen before. They weren't here to save him. One of the soldiers stopped, locking onto him. Target acquired. The word sent a chill down Zane's spine. In an instant, they opened fire. Instinct took over. Zane moved. Before he even realized what he was doing, his body reacted, twisting, dodging, faster than humanly possible. The energy blasts whizzed past him, melting the metal walls behind him. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He ran. His bare feet pounded against the cold steel floor as he sprinted through the crumbling facility. The halls blurred around him as if his body was moving faster than his brain could process. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from something else, something thrilling. He wasn't normal anymore. Another blast barely missed his head, scorching the wall beside him. "Stop running," one of the soldiers growled through his helmet. "You can't escape. We will take you apart piece by piece if we have to." Zane gritted his teeth. They thought he was prey. They were wrong. A door loomed ahead. It was marked Hangar Bay. Zane didn't stop to think. He slammed his shoulder into the control panel, forcing the doors open just enough to squeeze through. Inside, ships were lined up like caged beasts, waiting to be unleashed. His pulse raced. This was his way out. Behind him, the soldiers were closing in. "Seal a hangar," one shouted. "Do not let him reach the ships." Zane bolted. His feet barely touched the ground as he leaped onto a loading platform, his body moving with impossible precision. Something inside him had awakened. There was no time to question it. He needed to leave. Now. A sleek black ship sat at the end of the hangar, its engines glowing faintly. It wasn't one of the facility's standard crafts. It looked faster, deadlier, experimental. Perfect. Zane dashed towards it. The soldiers were right behind him. "Target is reaching a vessel. Shoot to kill." Zane jumped. A bullet tore through the air where his head had been a second ago. He twisted in midair, his instincts sharper than ever. He landed hard against the ship's hull, grabbing the edge of the open cockpit. One of the soldiers aimed directly at him. Too late. Zane yanked himself inside and slammed his hand onto the console. The ship roared to life. Red lights turned blue. Engines hummed. Systems unlocked. Unauthorized access detected. A robotic voice warned. Zane growled. "Override. Code required." He had no code, but something in his blood reacted to the ship. The controls pulsed beneath his fingertips. The screen flashed. Override accepted. The ship's weapons blasted to life, sending an energy wave through the hangar. The soldiers barely had time to react before they were thrown back like rag dolls. Zane grinned. "Yeah, this'll do." Without hesitation, he grabbed the controls. The ship lurched upward, spinning toward the massive blast doors. Outside, he could see the stars. The endless dark. Freedom. But before he could escape, the comms crackled. "Subject Z-13 is attempting launch. Lockdown in progress." The hangar doors started to close. Zane's heart pounded. It was now or never. He slammed the thrusters forward. The ship surged ahead, faster than anything he had ever piloted. The closing doors loomed before him. Too narrow. Too fast. "Come on," he muttered. "Faster." The ship reacted. The engines roared. And in a blur of motion, Zane shot through the closing gap, narrowly escaping into the abyss of space. Behind him, the facility erupted in flames. For the first time in days, Zane exhaled. He was free. But the hunt had only just begun. The wanted ghost. The ship's cockpit was eerily silent except for the steady hum of the engines. Zane's hands gripped the controls, his knuckles white. He had escaped the facility, but the battle was far from over. A red warning flashed across the screen. Alert. Multiple loc ons DTTCTE. Zane's stomach twisted. He glanced at the radar. 3 enemy ships were closing in fast, their weapons charged and ready. Of course they wouldn't let me go that easily, he muttered. A cold, robotic voice echoed through the comms. Z-13, surrender your vessel immediately. You are considered a galactic threat. You will not survive. Zane exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He wasn't just being chased, he was being hunted. And not just by anyone. These ships had no markings, no insignias. That meant Black Ops. No trials, no negotiations, just capture or kill. Zane's instincts kicked in. His fingers danced across the console, trying to make sense of the ship's controls. This was not standard human technology. The buttons glowed in an unfamiliar script. The thrusters responded almost too fast, and the targeting system seemed alive. What the hell did I steal? No time for answers. The enemy ships were closing in. Boom. A blast streaked past, barely missing his hull. The force rattled the cockpit, warning sirens blaring. Fine. You want me? Come get me. Zane yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sudden roll. The inertia slammed him back into the seat, but his body barely felt it. His reflexes were sharper than ever. He twisted through the stars, dodging incoming fire, his movements instinctive, inhuman. One of the enemy ships pulled up beside him, its twin plasma cannons charging. Zane's fingers twitched. Without thinking, he reached out. Something inside him pulsed. For a fraction of a second, the enemy ship's weapons glitched, the lights flickered, the cannons powered down, just long enough for Zane to react. He fired. The blast tore through the enemy ship's engines. The explosion rippled through space as the vessel spiraled out of control, disappearing into the void. 1 down, 2 to go. Zane's heart pounded. What just happened? He hadn't hacked their systems. He hadn't even touched the ship's tech. It had felt like his mind had done it. Another explosion rocked the ship. The second pursuer was relentless, peppering him with laser fire. Zane gritted his teeth. No more running. He jerked the controls, flipping the ship into a dead stall. For a brief moment, he hung motionless in space. The second enemy ship shot past him. Perfect. Zane slammed the thrusters, reversing direction in an instant. The enemy pilot barely had time to react before Zane's plasma cannons ripped through their hull. A fiery explosion swallowed the ship. Only one left. But before Zane could celebrate, his ship lurched violently. A tractor beam. The last enemy ship had locked onto him. Zane's systems flickered, power draining. He struggled against the controls, but the ship wouldn't respond. He was being reeled in like a fish on a hook. Through the view screen, he saw the final pursuer, a sleek, black warship, far more advanced than the others. It dwarfed his stolen vessel, its hull covered in strange, shifting symbols. This wasn't just a bounty hunter. This was something else. A voice came through the comms, not robotic, but cold. Amused, calculating. Interesting, the voice mused. You fight well, Abomination. But this game is over. Zane's pulse quickened. Whoever this was, they weren't underestimating him. They knew exactly what he was. And that scared him more than anything else. His mind raced. His body trembled, not with fear, but with power. Whatever was inside him, whatever was making him more than human, it wasn't finished yet. Zane closed his eyes. He reached out, not with his hands, but with something deeper. For a second, he felt everything. The hum of the enemy ship, the power coursing through its systems, the delicate balance of energy holding the tractor beam in place. He focused, and then, with a single thought, he shattered it. The tractor beam exploded in a shower of sparks. Zane's ship was free. He didn't wait for the enemy to react. He punched the hyperdrive, locking onto the nearest set of coordinates. The stars stretched into infinity, and Zane Carter disappeared. The man who shouldn't exist. Zane's ship burst out of hyperspace into the vast, empty void of an unknown sector. The sudden drop left his head spinning, his body still humming from the power he had just unleashed. He had broken a tractor beam. With his mind, he gripped the controls, trying to steady his breathing. This wasn't normal. None of this was. Who am I becoming? Before he could process it, the ship's system chirped. Warning. Unknown Q or deviant TA2S. Low power. Shields at 12%. Nearest habitable location. Unidentified outpost. 32,000 km. Zane exhaled. He needed to land. He needed answers. He guided the ship toward the outpost, a small decrepit station floating on the edge of a dying star. It looked abandoned, but nothing in this galaxy was ever truly abandoned. The ship rattled as it entered the docking bay. Zane barely had enough power to bring it in for a smooth landing. The moment the engines died, silence swallowed him. No alarms, no gunfire, no pursuit. For now, the outpost. The air inside the station was stale, heavy with dust and rust. The lights flickered as Zane stepped cautiously onto the metal floor, his senses sharp. Something felt wrong. The station was silent, but it wasn't dead. Faint hums of energy pulsed beneath the walls. The place was still active, but abandoned by anything living. Or so he thought. From the shadows, a voice spoke. You should not exist. Zane spun, his muscles tensed for a fight. A figure stepped forward. A tall, wiry man, draped in a tattered cloak, his skin ashen gray, his eyes glowing faintly blue. A voidborn. A race long thought to be extinct. Zane's heart pounded. Voidborns were myths, ghost stories whispered in the dark. They were scientists, explorers, and the first species to vanish when the oblivion cycle began. So why was one standing right in front of him? The man tilted his head. I know what you are. Zane clenched his fists. Yeah, mind explaining it to me? Because I have no idea. The Voidborn smirked. You are the mistake. The monster. The thing they swore would never happen. Zane's blood ran cold. Who's they? The man stepped closer. The ones who created you. Zane felt the weight of those words sink into his bones. This wasn't just about him being hunted. This went deeper. He wasn't just an escaped prisoner. He was a secret, a mistake the galaxy had buried. And now it was waking up. The truth in the dark. Zane's jaw tightened. You know something. Tell me. The Voidborn chuckled darkly. Oh, I know plenty. But the real question is, do you want the truth? Zane's pulse quickened. Truth. That word carried weight. The man continued, his glowing eyes locked onto Zane's. They built you to be the perfect soldier. They gave you power beyond human limits. Then they realized their mistake. Zane swallowed hard. And what mistake was that? The Voidborn smirked. That you weren't just a weapon. Silence stretched between them. Zane's hands curled into fists. He needed answers. He needed to know why he was different, why he could do things no human should. Before he could demand more, the Voidborn's expression darkened. He looked past Zane, toward the docking bay. They're coming. Zane turned. His ship's sensors blinked a warning. Multiple life forms detected. They had found him. The chase wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The ghosts of oblivion. The station's cold metal walls trembled as the enemy ships closed in. Zane's mind raced. His heart pounded against his ribs, but something deep inside him remained calm, focused, ready. The Voidborn man, the one who claimed to know the truth, stood still, his glowing blue eyes watching the approaching threat. "You have two choices," he said. "Run or fight." Zane clenched his fists. Running wasn't an option. He had done enough of that. "How many are coming?" Zane asked. The Voidborn smirked. "Enough to erase you from existence." A deep mechanical thud echoed through the station as docking clamps latched onto the exterior. Zane felt them before he heard them. Hunters. Not regular soldiers. Not mercenaries. These were specialists. The kind of killers sent after things that should never exist. Zane inhaled sharply. His muscles tightened, his senses expanded. He could hear the faint click of weapons being primed, the soft, methodical breathing of trained assassins. Then, silence. The kind of silence that comes before blood is spilled. The Voidborn shifted his stance. "They will not stop hunting you. Not until you are dead." Zane's hands curled into fists. "Then let's give them a reason to be afraid." The ambush. The station's lights flickered as the first intruder stepped inside. A black armored figure, moving like a shadow. Then another, and another. 7 in total. Zane could feel them spreading out, scanning the area with precision. Their armor had no insignia, no markings, no identity, just like Zane. The lead hunter made a gesture. The others fanned out. Zane didn't wait. With inhuman speed, he lunged. His fist slammed into the first hunter's helmet, the force shattering the visor like glass. The man crumpled instantly. The second raised a weapon, too slow. Zane pivoted, his hand gripping the hunter's wrist, snapping it backward with unnatural strength. The weapon fired wildly, a plasma bolt searing through another hunter's chest. The rest reacted fast, but not fast enough. Zane moved like a phantom, dodging, striking, his instincts operating on a level beyond human limits. One enemy tried to flank him. Zane turned just in time. A blade flashed, then stopped. Mid-air. Frozen. The hunter's body trembled, his arm locked in place, his own weapon refusing to obey him. Zane's eyes widened. He was doing it again. He wasn't just strong. He wasn't just fast. He could control things. With just a thought, he sent a pulse through the air. The hunter's own blade twisted and plunged into his own chest. Zane exhaled. The last two enemies hesitated. For the first time, Zane saw something unexpected in their body language. Fear. But before he could finish them, a deafening explosion tore through the station. Zane barely had time to react as the floor collapsed beneath him. He plummeted into the darkness below. The abyss below. Zane hit the ground hard, rolling to his feet. Above, the station was in flames. The hunters were gone, but he wasn't alone. The Voidborn stood across from him, unharmed. He stared at Zane like he had seen a god awaken. "You truly have no idea what you are," the Voidborn murmured. Zane wiped blood from his lip, his body still vibrating with raw power. "Then tell me." The Voidborn's glowing eyes narrowed. "Not yet." Zane took a step closer. "Why the hell not?" The Voidborn tilted his head. "Because you're not ready." Before Zane could argue, a distant howl echoed through the darkness. Not human. Not machine. Something else. The Voidborn smirked. "And because we have a much bigger problem." Zane turned. In the shadows, something moved. Something that had been waiting. Something far worse than the hunters. The nameless horror. The sound slithered through the dark. A low, guttural howl. Zane's instincts flared like fire in his veins. Whatever was in the abyss with them wasn't human. The Voidborn didn't move. He only watched, his glowing blue eyes locked onto the shadows. Waiting. Zane tightened his fists. "What the hell is that?" The Voidborn smirked. "Something older than this station. Older than your hunters. And very, very hungry." Another growl. closer this time. Then the first pair of eyes opened. No, not one pair. Dozens. Glowing amber orbs blinked to life in the darkness, attached to something massive. Something shifting. Something changing. Zane barely had time to register the creature's shape before it lunged. He dove sideways, barely missing razor-sharp claws that slammed into the metal floor. Sparks exploded from the impact. The Voidborn dodged smoothly, still eerily calm. Zane hit the ground, rolled, and came up ready to fight. But the moment he saw it clearly, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't one creature. It was many. A shifting mass of black flesh, coiling and twisting, its form never settling. Its dozens of eyes blinked in unnatural patterns. Zane's gut twisted. This thing was wrong. It was like reality was rejecting it, unable to decide what shape it should be. The Voidborn's voice cut through the chaos. Ever heard of the oblivion cycle? Zane barely dodged another strike. Not the best time for a history lesson. The Voidborn chuckled. Oh, but it is. Because that thing. It's one of the reasons your entire galaxy fears it. The creature lurched forward, its limbs extending too far, too fast. Zane's instincts screamed. He moved on reflex, ducking just before a black tendril sliced through the air where his head had been. It wasn't just a monster. It was something the universe itself had tried to erase. The impossible kill. Zane moved without thinking. His muscles burned, his body reacting faster than his mind. His power surged. He grabbed the nearest chunk of metal debris and threw it. The piece should have bounced off the creature's shifting flesh. It didn't. Instead, the second it touched the monster, the metal disintegrated. Zane's eyes widened. That's not normal. The Voidborn shrugged. Neither are you. The creature howled again, its many mouths screaming in different pitches. Then it charged. Zane braced himself, then stopped, because something inside him shifted. For the first time, he wasn't just moving. He was seeing. The world around him slowed. The creature's body, its erratic, chaotic movement, suddenly made sense. Zane could see where it would move next, where it would strike. Where? The last truth. The universe seemed to bend around him. Zane moved without thinking, his body flowing like a shadow through the chaos. The creature lashed out, too slow. He twisted, dodging effortlessly, stepping into the flow of the battle like he had done this before. But he hadn't. Had he? The Voidborn watched from the edge of the battlefield, his glowing blue eyes sharp, studying, calculating. Zane felt his power rising, stronger than ever before. The creature lunged again. Zane didn't dodge this time. He reached out. The second his fingers touched the monster's writhing flesh, everything changed. Visions of oblivion. The world around him shattered. Zane was no longer in the station, no longer in his body. He was somewhere else. Someone else. A black void stretched endlessly before him. Stars flickered and vanished, swallowed by an unseen force. A cycle. An ending. He saw figures standing at the edge of creation, beings so massive and ancient they made entire galaxies seem like grains of sand. And at the center of it all, himself. Not as he was now, but as something more. Something terrifying. Something that had been erased from history. The truth hit him like a shockwave. The galaxy hadn't branded him a monster. They had tried to forget him, because the last time he had awakened, he had nearly ended everything. Returned to the present. Zane gasped as he snapped back to reality. The creature was still there. The station was still burning. But he understood now. He knew what it was. It wasn't just a beast. It wasn't just some experiment gone wrong. It was the same as him. A relic from the past. A fragment of something the universe had tried to erase. And he had just reactivated it. The Voidborn stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. You remember now, don't you? Zane clenched his fists. Not everything, but enough. The Voidborn smirked. Then it's time you make a choice. The creature let out a final, ear-piercing shriek. The station trembled. The walls cracked. Zane exhaled. His power surged. His past was still a mystery. But one thing was clear. The galaxy had called him a monster. And now it was time to show them why.